Welcome back to Fossil Ridge Games. Today we're going to be talking about Scythe Expeditions. I'm going to walk you through some basic turns so you can understand the flow of gameplay. Two different players. We have Tatanka and then we have Lumberjack playing today. So I'm just going to walk you through kind of what the opening turns will look like for these two players. Here's the first player example for our game. It's going to have Gunter and Noct. So here are our two companions. We have a hero and then an animal companion. Next we have the mech itself, which is this bulky, massive looking mech. This mech is special, and its special ability is that it can have 5 quests, it can have 5 items and 5 meteorites melded onto the mech as opposed to the traditional 4. And the opponent for Tatanka is going to be known as Lumberjack. It's this mech with these saws on its arms. What's kind of cool about this is that we have Akiku is the main character, and then we also have Jiro, which is a monkey companion. In addition to that, the special abilities for a Lumberjack is that it can defeat, so it has a vanquish action. It reduces the cost of the first corruption by 1. So as an example, if there's a 4 on the space, it would only cost 3 power to defeat this token as opposed to the normal 4. As a quick strategy tip on the first turn, if able, look at both your character and your companion and look to see what types of workers that you need to activate them. As an example, these are both activated with either a red or a green worker. So one of the best moves that you can make on the front end of the game is to try to get either a red or green worker, and that's what we're going to do. Notice that the cube is in the standardized position, which means that we can move, play, and gather over the course of this turn. Since it's our first turn, we get all 3 of these actions. We're going to move up to the board, and we kind of start at this settlement location. Once you leave this area, you can never come back to it. So it's going to be Tatanka's turn. And in this case, we can move up to 3 spaces. So for our move action 1, 2, we're going to go ahead and stop on this location, which is the sawmill. Next up, we have a gather action. And notice that you can gather either a red or a green worker from this location. Now, what we mentioned before is that our first 2 cards in our draw deck are going to trigger by using red and green. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and grab a red worker like this, and then I'm just going to simply place it onto my board in this spot. Finally, I have the ability to do a play action. So I'm going to take Gunter, and I'm going to play Gunter onto the table, place it just to the right, and I get 1 Guile token, so I'm going to go ahead and raise the Guile up by 1 point. Next, we have that with a red worker, I can activate the special ability on the bottom of this card, and guess what? It says gain a green worker, so that's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to take this, I'm going to take the worker I just got. For my gather action, I'm going to place it onto this card. Now notice, why is this important? Notice that our other card, Noct, this wolf companion, triggers by using a green worker. So now that I put the red worker on this, I can trigger this card, and it allows me to gain a green worker. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and stick it on Tatanka, thus ending the first turn. Now over to Lumberjack for their first turn. Please notice that these are the 2 cards that start in the opening hand for this player. And notice that we have both a blue and a yellow worker. So kind of the name of the game is to try to get sort of your engine up and going as soon as possible. Lumberjack is already at this settlement at the beginning. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did with Tatanka. We're going to go 1, 2, I can move up to 3 spaces. We're going to stop on the settlement, and notice that I can either pick up a blue or a yellow worker from this case. So in this particular example, I'm going to go ahead and gather a yellow worker. I'm going to go back to my mech board, and it goes simply onto the mech board. Then finally, as the last part of this turn, I can do a play action. And notice that now, since I have a yellow worker, I can activate Akiku, the character. So I'm going to go ahead and do this play action. Notice when I play this card, it does have an orange icon. I'm going to gain 1 power on my tracker. Next up, we're going to go ahead and just kind of zoom in, and if I use a yellow, I can gain a face-up meteorite or solve. I don't have any quests right now, so I can't solve. So I think it's a pretty great idea to gain a face-up meteorite. So as part of the play action, I'm going to take the yellow worker and activate that ability. When I go ahead and gain a face-up meteorite, I'm going to go over to the game board and notice that I can gain any of these 5. So I'm going to look over and I see 2 meteorites located in these positions. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one right here. Since I'm drawing a card, I am going to go ahead and place it into my discard pile since I went ahead and I gained that card. So now for next turn, notice too that now I will need a purple worker, so I got to keep my eyes out for possibly gaining a purple worker in the future. Here's the start of Tatanka's second turn. I have to move the cube, so I'm going to move it up to this position, and now I have to move and gather over the course of my turn. I'm going to move back to the game board, and I'm going to look to start getting cards into my draw deck, so I'm going to go ahead and move 1, 2. I'm going to move to this position over here, and now I have a gather action. This purple card just simply means I pull something off the draw deck, I flip it over, and I'm going to put it into my discard pile. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Notice that I will need a yellow worker in the future. Next, we're going to go back to the game board, and there is this icon right here, and this is known as Rescue. This allows me to take 1 card from my discard pile and a corresponding meeple and put it back sort of into a ready position, so I can take the meeple off, place it onto my game board, and then I can take Gunter and put Gunter back into my draw, thus ending the second turn. For Lumberjack's second turn, we're going to do kind of the same thing, so I'm going to move the cube straight up, and I have to do a move and gather action. But please note, I can do these in any order. So in this case, when I'm looking over at Lumberjack, I have the ability to either gather a blue or a yellow worker. On the previous turn, I gathered a yellow worker. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and gather a blue worker. And the reason why I'm doing that, I can then eventually activate my companion. So I'm going to take that worker and just simply place it onto the game board. Now I have to complete a move action. And in this case, I'm going to start exploring the game board. I'm going to take Lumberjack, move 1 position. I'm going to go ahead and take this Explore token off. It goes onto the mech game board. I'm going to take this tile and flip it over. We have found the research base. Notice in the bottom right-hand corner, it tells me that I need 5+ tokens. So I'm going to go over to my corruption bag, reach into the corruption bag, and start pulling tokens until I hit 5 or more. In this case, I pulled a 4 first and then another 4. These are going to go onto this space, thus ending Lumberjack's turn. This is now Tatanka's turn. I have to move the cube. I'm going to move it to this location right here. So on this turn, I'm going to have to move and play or play and move. So I'm going to go back to the game board and take a look to see what we're going to do. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do my play action first. So I have Gunter, and I'm going to activate Gunter, which means I'm going to get 1 guile on my tracker. I'm going to go ahead and raise it up by 1, place Gunter into the discard pile. Next up, I'm going to need a red worker to activate Gunter. I go ahead and do that, and the text simply says that I can gain a green worker. I gained 1 recently. I'm going to gain another green worker and stick it onto my playboard. Now I have 2 of them. Next up, I'm going to go back to the game board and complete my move action. I'm going to start exploring the game board like my opponent has. I'm going to go 1, 2 spaces. I'm going to go ahead and take this token and put it on Tatanka's playboard. Next up, I'm going to flip this tile over, and it is the Weird Forest. Notice in the bottom corner right here, it says that I need 5+ icons to go ahead and cover this up. I'm going to go over to my corruption bag. In this case, I pulled a 5, so I'm going to place that directly onto the board and place this back. And go ahead and throw Tatanka onto this. In the future, I can gain a purple worker. This is now Lumberjack's turn, so I'm going to have to move the cube. I'm going to move it over in this direction, which means that I can do a play and gather. So the first thing I'm going to do is a play action. I only have 1 card left to play. It's going to be Jiro the Monkey. I'm going to take Jiro the Monkey, put it into the discard pile, and go ahead and gain the 1 guile on my tracker. Next up, I have a blue worker, so I can place it onto Jiro. And Jiro has 2 different abilities. I can do a Vanquish action, but I don't really have enough tokens to do that. Or I can activate the previous card's ability. Now in this case, I can activate this, And I will go ahead and pull this off, and it's a vanquish action. So in this case, it doesn't really do anything. So I'm going to move on to my gather step. So I did my play, now I'm moving on to gather. I go back to the game space that I'm on, and this one is pretty cool. I can gain 2 guile. So I'm going to move back to my player board and go ahead and raise this up another 2 points. So I'm building up a decent amount of guile. I can start vanquishing some of the corruption tokens very soon. It's Tatanka's next turn. I'm going to go ahead and take this cube and move it over 1 position. So for this turn, I'm going to go ahead and do a move and gather action. I'm going to go ahead and look at the game board. And something else that I'm going to need in the future, I know that I need a yellow worker. So in this case, I can do a move and gather. So I can go 1, 2, 3 spaces. And please notice right here that I can either gain a blue or a yellow worker. In this case, I'm going to use my gather action. And I'm going to place a yellow worker onto my mech. In the future now, I can start activating this card that I got in a previous turn. We're now on to Lumberjack's next turn. I'm going to take the cube and move it 1 position over. I can do move and gather this turn. Move back to the game board here, and there is Lumberjack. Something I'm going to want to do is start amassing cards so I can start increasing my hand size and having some additional options. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. I'm going to move over to the mech junkyard. This symbol means I'm going to draw 2 purple cards off the draw deck, which is this. Flip them over and I get to keep 1. These are actually both quests. I haven't unlocked position number 14, but number 5 position was unlocked at the very beginning of the game. And what's kind of cool about this is now I can start working on solving quests. What makes this even cooler is that Lumberjack is actually on position number 5. So in a subsequent turn, I can actually move to solve this quest. Moving back over to my game board, I'm going to take the quest and stick it into my discard pile. And this is going to end my turn. It's Tatanka's turn. And we're going to have to move the cube. And this time I'm going to move it 1 position to the right. So now I have to move and play over the course of this turn. I'm going to go back to the game board and kind of look around. On a move action, it's going to be kind of wise for me, especially if I have a play action, to explore a new site. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move Tatanka up to this location. I'm going to take the exploration token, stick it on Tatanka's mech. Next up, I'm going to flip this over. And we found the impact zone. Notice that it needs 5+ tokens from the corruption bag. I'm going to go ahead and mix that up, start pulling tokens. First token I pull is a 5, and that's going to satisfy the requirements of this card. I'm going to go ahead and put that down. Next up, I'm going to throw Tatanka onto the actual spot. The final part of my turn is going to be devoted to a play action. I only have 1 card left in my hand. I'm going to go ahead and play Knocked. When I do that, there's 1 orange icon in the top corner, thus my tracker goes up 1 point. Next up, I can activate Nox's special ability by placing a worker onto this card. And what does this say? It says gain the core value of any card you control. Well, that's going to be pretty great. I'm going to look at any card that I control, and I control 3 cards, so I can have the core value off of any of these. In this case, I'm going to activate this icon at the top of the card and give myself 1 additional guile. When I look at Lumberjack, Lumberjack is depleted. All of the cards have been played and are in the discard pile. I actually have nothing on this side of the board to actually play. So what I'm going to do is a refresh action. I'm going to take my cube and stick it on this part of the board, which means I refresh. What does that mean? I take all my workers, place them back onto the mech. All the cards from my discard pile go into my hand, so I'm going to move them over to the left-hand side of the board so I can see them, and I can start playing those cards out next round. Over to Tatanka, I have to move the cube. In this case, I'm going to move it over 1 spot, so I have to move and gather this turn. Moving back up to the board, I'm going to start looking at the top row. So I'm going to explore another location, move 1 position, take the exploration token, stick it onto the mech. Next, I'm going to flip over this tile. And notice in the bottom right-hand corner, instead of it saying 5+, I need 8+ corruption tokens. So I'm going to go over to my corruption bag and start drawing tokens. In this case, I drew first a 4 and then a 5. So I'm going to take those and stack those. So that's 9 points of corruption total, which satisfies that 8. I'm going to put the ice cave back down onto the map. Take these cubes and place them onto the game board. Finally, now that I've moved, I'm going to go ahead and move this up just a little bit so you can see. Notice at the bottom of this card, I can gain a purple worker and I can gain a coin. So that's pretty great. So for my gather action, I'm going to grab one of these purple workers and stick it onto my playboard. In addition to that, I'm now going to gain a coin from the supply. And I'm going to go ahead and just throw this onto the screen and notice that there is a 1 on this. This is going to count for 1 victory point at the end of the game. I'm going to go ahead and take that and also put it onto my playboard. So now I'm starting to amass victory points by simply moving around the game board. On Lumberjack's last turn, Lumberjack performed a refresh action. I'm going to take the cube and move it to the starting position. When it's in the starting position, I'm going to be able to execute all 3 actions over the course of this turn. I'm going to go ahead and look up at the game board in this position, and I kind of want some additional cards, so I'm going to go ahead and gamble. I'm going to draw 2 purple cards. Here they are. I'm going to flip them over, and in this case, I'm able to keep one of those. I'm feeling kind of lucky at this point because I found another quest. I'm going to go ahead and discard this meteorite, and I'm going to take the quest and stick it into my discard pile. I want to try to amass quests pretty early on at the beginning of the game and close them out. If I'm able to do that relatively early in the game, I can start having the ability to get a glory. So that's something that's going to be pretty interesting for me. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and look at the map, and I am at position number 5. And on the last turn, I was able to obtain a quest, and this is going to be for quest position number 5, which means that my mech has to be at that location, which my mech actually is. So for my play action this turn, I'm going to look for a card in my hand in which I can solve a quest. And guess what? Your main character, each of the main characters in the game, has what's called a solve action. So it says right here, I can solve, and if you solve, you gain the core values of all of your solved quests. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and play this card. So this goes into my discard pile. I'm going to gain the icon at the top, which is going to be 1 power. Next, I have to play a worker, which is going to be yellow, and it allows me to solve a quest. Well, guess what? I have this quest right here. I'm going to try to zoom in as best as I can on this. Notice that there is a guile marker here. That is what I need to do to solve this quest. I'm going to go over to my player board and kind of zoom in. Notice that I have a decent amount of guile. I have 3 points of guile. I'm going to spend 1 of those points of guile, which corresponds to this icon right here, and then it's going to give me a power. So I'm going to go back over to my game board, and it gives me a power. Finally, I can take this card, and I'm going to tuck it under the top end of my board. So I'm going to do that, and so just the top edge shows. Finally, what happens on this card, it says gain the core values of all of your solved quests. So I'm going to look at all my solved quests and notice that I have the ability to gain another guile token. So that's what I'm going to do. Take this and move this up 1 position. This has been a fairly impactful turn, but it's actually not over. I've only done my play and gather actions for the turn, and I still have the ability to move. And guess what? I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to move up to this unexplored space. I'm going to take this exploration token and stick it on my mech. I'm going to flip this token over, this tile, and we found the crater rim. Notice in the bottom corner, it says I need 5 or more plus tokens. I'm going to go into my corruption bag. In this case, I drew a 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back onto the game board and move my marker to this location, thus ending my turn for the round. Tatanka has kind of run out of the ability to play any cards. There is nothing in Tatanka's draw deck at this point. This is a great time for a refresh action. Move the cube to refresh. Take all your workers, put them back on your mech. Take all of your cards and rotate them back to the left-hand side of your mech so that you can start playing them on the next turn. This is going to be Lumberjack's next turn. Going to go ahead and move the cube up so we do a move and gather. Let's look at the game board and try to figure out where we're going. So in this case, I want to have some more guile tokens. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 spaces And then finally, I can gather at this spot, and that's going to be 2 guile. Moving back over to my playboard, I'm going to raise up my guile tracker by 2. Starting off after the refresh, it's pretty clear that we have a bunch of workers, but not too many cards for this player. So I think probably the best course of action is to start getting some more cards. So we're going to go ahead and be able to do all of our actions this turn. So we're going to go back up to the game board and kind of check out what's going on. We're kind of at the top of the board, and we need to start moving maybe back toward the core of the board to get a few more cards. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move 3 spaces, and we're going to end up at this space here in the middle. If I had enough movement, I would have actually moved down here because I could have chosen a card. We're going to pull 2 at random and take a look at them. So I've got both a yellow and a green worker, so I can actually pick up either of these. So I'm going to take a look at them and figure out what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and take this, and then this one is going to go ahead and go into my discard pile. So that's going to be my move and gather. And then finally, I need to play some sort of card this round. So I'm going to go ahead and look, and Knocked is going to be my best choice. I'm going to go ahead and play that out. Gives me a power token. Then I can activate this at the bottom, and I can gain the core value of any other card that I control. So I'm going to go ahead and gain the core value on Gunter and move that up 1, and that ends Tatanka's turn. Back over to Lumberjack, I'm going to move the cube over. And this time we're going to do a play and gather option. And something that I want to at least show you once during this video is the vanquish action. So we're going to go over to Jiro, the monkey, and at the bottom, and all of your animal companions have a vanquish action in general in this game. So we're going to look at this, and we can see that we do have a vanquish action. In addition to that, we have a blue worker that's available. So we're going to go ahead and do a vanquish action. I'm going to take this, I'm going to play it. And when I play it, I get to activate the upper portion of the card, so I'm going to go up 1 guile. In addition to that, and I'll move this over just a little bit, I'm going to take the worker and put it on Jiro, and this is going to allow me to vanquish. Now, as a special ability for Lumberjack, and this is going to be just for Lumberjack, so I'll zoom in on this really quick. It says, whenever you vanquish, reduce the cost of the first corruption of each color by 1. And that's going to be for each color, so that's pretty neat. I'm going to go up to the game board, and what we're going to see is that there's a 4, and then there is a 4 underneath of it. Now, Lumberjack's special ability will allow me to decrease the amount to defeat each of these tokens by 1. Because they're 2 different colors, if they were both orange, that would not be the case. So we're going to go ahead and go back down to the game board. And we're going to notice that I need 3 power to defeat the first token. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop that down to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this 4 off. Thankfully, I have that corruption bonus. And I'm going to move that over to my player board. Now, what's great about vanquishing, I can continue to vanquish until I run out of points on my tracker. I'm going to move over to the game board, and as you can see, there is now one of these blue corruption tokens on here as well. I'm going to use Lumberjack's ability to drop this from a 4 to a 3. So I'm going to move back over to my board, and I'm going to decrease my tracker by 3, so 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and take this token and place it onto the mech. Now, the bottom part of a vanquish action, when you're using one of your animal companions, it says, if this vanquish removes the location's final corruption, you may gain the benefit revealed. I'm going to go over to the game board so we can figure out what that means. Both of the corruption tokens came off of this icon right here. And if I zoom in, this is going to allow me to play an item onto my mech. Now, when I look at the cards that I have under my control for Lumberjack, I don't actually have any items that I can play, so I'm going to lose that free action. But if I did have, let's say, an item, I'm going to go ahead and just put one onto the screen real quick. If I did, let's say, have this item under my control, I could play it onto my mech by tucking it under the right-hand side of the board. So next up, I was able to do my play action, but now I'm going to gather. So what's great about what I just did is that I spent a bunch of my points on my tracker, but I'm going to get 2 guile back. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to move back to my board and then increase my guile tracker by 2. So I really didn't lose all that much during that round, but I was able to gain 2 of these corruption tokens. Just as a reminder, at the end of the game, each of those corruption tokens is going to be worth 2 victory points. In addition to that, one of the win conditions for you to get one of your stars onto the board is that you have 7 corruption tokens. So this player is on their way now to gaining that. So I have 2 of the 7 corruption tokens. Back over to Tatanka, I still have a bunch of workers and not many cards in my draw area. So what I'm going to do this round is going to do a gather/move action. I'm going to move back to the board so you can see kind of what's going on. Now I could stay at this spot and draw 2 random cards, or I could move down 1 spot and then pull anything I want off the board. And kind of when I zoom out, I'm going to notice that I have 5 cards. And something that's kind of great, I know that I have a bunch of workers. So now I have the ability to kind of pull anything that I want off the board. So I'm going to see this card in the upper corner, and this is going to be a quest. And so I also noticed that I have a green worker at the bottom. And when I look at the resources that I have, I've got 1 green worker out, and I also have 1 on my mech. I also like this playability, so I'm going to go ahead and pick this one up. Something else that's great about it, it's a quest. So I'm going to need to probably perform at least 3 quests over the course of the game. That's something that I recommend. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one up and put it into my discard pile. Next, we're going to move over to Lumberjack, and I'm going to go ahead and just flash forward a little bit. So I added a few extra exploration tokens onto Lumberjack. We're just going to assume that many, many more turns have passed. I want to walk you through how to gain glory as kind of like one of the final video clips so you can kind of understand where you're going over the course of the game. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and flip the cube over to move and gather, and thus move over to the game board and take a look at what's happening. I'm going to zoom in on this region. Specifically, what we're looking for is this icon, and it looks like a star. So that's going to be pretty much identical to how the stars are shaped in the game, and this is going to indicate how we play a glory token onto the board. So I have a move and gather action. We move Lumberjack onto this space, and now I can gather either these 2 icons or I can gather a glory. We're going to look back at our game board real quick, and we're just going to count up the number of exploration tokens that we have, which equals 5. In the center of the game board is this right here. And what this is showing us is that, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. One of the conditions to gain glory is that I have either 7 workers or 5 of these exploration tokens. So I actually have that. When I go back up to the board, if I use a gather action right here, this is going to allow me to gain 1 glory. So what do? I go back to my board right here. I take 1 of my glory tokens, and now I'm going to put it on this centralized board right here. What this just simply means is now I have 1 glory, and this is going to start powering up some of the cards that I actually have in the game. So what exactly does that mean? I'm going to go ahead and take the 2 basic cards that you start with. So you have your character, and then you also have your companion. So notice kind of at the top, anytime I play this card, I'm going to gain 1 power. But in addition to that, I'm going to try to zoom in on this as best as I can. Notice that there's 1 glory next to this fist. So if I play this card in the future, I'm going to get 1 power. I'm going to get an additional power. Now, if I have a second glory out, I'm also going to gain a guile. So this is kind of the progression that you're going to go through. So getting a glory fairly early on in the game is going to give you these additional bonuses. We're going to pop over to Jiro, and we're going to look at the same thing. So if I don't have any glory, it's going to give me 1 guile. Then if I have 1 glory, it's going to basically give me 2 guile. And then if I have 2 glory, it's going to give me 3 guile altogether. So this is kind of how the progression system works in the game. And thus, if you have glory, you can start amassing points on your tracker much faster. And that consequently is going to allow you to vanquish more often, and thus you're going to be able to get these corruption tokens, which is a great thing because one of the end conditions is that you can gain 2 victory points for each of the corruption tokens that you have on your game board. At this point in the video, I've gone over numerous example turns for the two different mechs, both Tatanka and Lumberjack. So hopefully you have a general sense of the game flow. And by no means was this video intended to go over all of the game mechanics in a lot of detail. I have actually created another video in which I dive into all of the game mechanics pretty heavily. And so if you want to check out that video, it's also available. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. And as always, have fun gaming.